So today I'm making Schupfnudeln. Now that's a potato dumpling. And unfortunately when I was younger I didn't have the time to make it very often. So my children may not remember it, but my grandchildren do. Because that's one of the perks of retirement. You get the time to do these things. Anyway, so this is pretty simple. These are potatoes that were left over from yesterday or the day before. Now I put them through a potato ricer, which is not fun because it's hard and I'm not good at it. But normally what I do is when I make mashed potatoes, I just make more, leave the leftover mashed potatoes in the fridge because these potatoes need to be cold. And then you have this mashed consistency. Anyways, I would not recommend to rice cold boiled potatoes. It's hard unless you're really strong. Anyways, so this is 500 grams of potatoes. So now what I need to add to that is an equal amount of regular flour. So here's my trusty old scale. So I'm adding 500 grams of flour. Now I'm not going to add it all in one. I'm going to do 300 grams at a time. So the first 300 grams go in. Now if this dough becomes too sticky, you can always add a little bit of milk. 1 egg. Look how nice that egg looks. It's from the farm down the street. Okay, now I've got messy hands, so I don't want to reach into my salt thing with egg on my hands. All right. Should have prepared that beforehand, shouldn't I? So all we need now is a pinch of salt, and a good pinch. I would say maybe half a teaspoon. And the magic ingredient, nutmeg. And I have this cute little grater. I love it. And I use the bigger grate. I find this too small. And if you want to move in here on the dough, you can see it especially on the egg. How, and the nutmeg smells so good. I love it. And in Schupfnudeln, nutmeg is just the best. Okay, so now this is pretty much the dough. Think I have enough nutmeg? Let's say I do, and I think I do. So now all you do is you start mixing this, and then it really depends on how dry your potatoes were to start with, if you need to add more flour or not. Or maybe add a little bit of milk, or just plain water, little droplets at a time. Now usually I go in there with my hands, but not yet. So let's mix it through. So I'm mixing it all through, and I'm noticing, see this dough? It's too crumbly, it's too dry. So I guess my potatoes were too dry. So I'm adding about 200 milliliters of milk. Now you could use water, and I think that does the trick, because look at the dough, how nicely it's coming together. And it's sort of a play on add a little bit of flour or not. It is never the same every time, because it depends on how dry your potatoes are. It depends on what kind of potatoes you have. Are they very starchy or not so starchy? So here we go. This is the dough. And now what I'm doing now is this. I'm taking some flour and I'm putting it all over my counter, which I had cleaned first, so it's nice and clean. No contamination there. And I leave this closed because I'm going to need lots of it. And then all I do is I turn out the dough onto the flour and I make it into a dough, into a sort of a well, it's sort of a roll, loafy kind of thing. And now I'm going to put my hands into this. Leave this over here. There you go. It's very much like making a cookie or a cake or a cookie dough or like any dough. And you want it relatively dry. You don't want it too wet. So this is coming together really nicely. There we go. And once I have this all nicely together like that, now the fun begins. And sometimes my grandchildren get into the action and getting themselves totally covered in flour. But that's part of the fun. Not today though. They don't feel like being dusted in flour today. Okay, so now we need more flour because we really want to cover this whole. Now I used to do this on cookie sheets and then I ended up having to clean all those. I found this is the better way to go. Now I have a little wooden knife which I find very useful because it doesn't scratch my counter. So all I do now is this. I leave this dough over here and make sort of little cigars. I don't know when I've seen a cigar last. Okay, so all this dough is going to turn into these kind of things, right? And then you take one at a time and just go like that. I've seen this on TV when people make gnocchi and stuff like that. I think it's a similar process. And now the fun begins. You take these little pieces and make worms. You can also call them noodles. And then these worms just go all over the table. And that's the fun part. This is where you can involve your kids and anyone that wants to make worms, aka noodles. Anyway, so I'm going to be doing all of these, and that takes a good, I don't know, 20 minutes, depending on how many hands you have helping you. And then all we have to do is boil them, and that is going to come next. So see you in about 20 minutes. All right, so look at my kitchen counter. I cleaned it up, and these are all the worms. Oh, wait, noodles. And they're really good. So they're different sizes and they're not sticking together. If you put them all together, they will stick. In the meantime, there's a pot on the stove and it's almost ready to boil. And so what we'll do now is in batches, and I usually do for this size pot, which is about, I don't know, this is 5-liter pot actually. I don't fill it all the way to the top because it foams up. The flour in there makes it foam up. So about 3 liters of water and just boil. So what I do is I take I have a system, you see. I take about 10, for that pot, about 20 noodles. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17. So in a cereal bowl, approximately that many noodles. Too many, it'll crowd it, not enough, and you'll make soup. So now if you stick them in there, you can see they start boiling, and once they float, which is in about 3 to 4 minutes, you can take them out here and let them sort of drip off a little bit, and then you can eat them. And I'll show you that once I've got them all boiled. See you in a bit. So as you can see, the first batch of noodles actually has risen to the top, and then I leave them in for about 2 minutes, so it's not even, so that they're nice and cooked through. And then I have a slotted spoon here, and I'll transfer them over here so they don't lie in water. And then the next batch goes in. So all the Schupfnudeln are cooked now, And you can eat them with various things. The way they're cooked, you could use them with savory stuff, like a bratwurst or a roast, or just on their own as a vegetarian dish with nothing, together with nothing, or with a salad. You could also make them sweet, and that just means you put a sweet dressing on it. So let's do that. That's one of my grandson's favorite, is the sweet variety. So let's go over to the stove. I've got a little teaspoon of butter melting here, and then I'm going to add a tiny sprinkle of salt to it, just a tiny, although I'm making a sweet dish. And if you come a bit closer, you can see this tray of noodles is all cooked. And so now I'm just going to put a few noodles in here. Oops. They are sticky. There we go. And then all we need to do is let them brown a little bit, because they are fully cooked. And one of my grandsons loves eating them just like that. The other is going to put a sweet dressing on it. So as you can see, they're starting, come in a bit closer here, you can see how they're starting to caramelize a little bit. And you can do that as much as you like. And I can eat that one. Okay. So you can have them really brown, or just a little bit. This one is starting to brown nicely. And then they get a bit of a crust, where those ones are rather soft and chewy, and those become crusty. Okay, so they're done now. So let's take them over to the plate. See, this one is really nicely caramelized. And then I always have a little jar, because it's so useful, with a little bit of, and I'm sure everybody has that, with a little bit of cinnamon in it, a little bit of sugar, and my jar is obviously as good as empty, and it just keeps in the cupboard for, I don't know, ever. And I just fill it and shake it, and there you have it. And then we'll just put it on the noodles, and there's your dessert, or a sweet dinner, whatever you like, or lunch. You know what it's actually really cool for? If you put it in a little thermos just like that, and you can eat it at a picnic or after school or something like that. So, and the cameraman of course has to eat it, it's really hot. There you go. So the Schupfnudeln are finished, and as I mentioned earlier, if you maybe come closer to the noodles here and take a look, they are sticky. So once they're a little cool and you can handle them with your hands, you add a little bit of oil. I like olive oil. I've already done this earlier so they wouldn't stick. But you can use any oil like sunflower or rapsöl or something like that. If you don't want the flavor of the olive oil. And then all you do is you gently mix them up, and this way, as you can see, they don't stick. So the other day I made chicken soup, and there's some chicken soup over here heating up for our lunch today. So we decided what we're going to do is we're going to take some of the Schupfnudeln, and these are still warm, but it doesn't really matter because the soup is going to be quite hot. Do you want more?
No.
No? Oh, well, what the heck. There you go. And then, once the broth is really hot, it goes over top and it's lunch. So I'll see you in a second. So as I mentioned, the soup is now pretty hot, and all we're going to do is we're going to turn the element off, and then we're just going to pour this over top. Now, we never did that at home, actually. This is sort of stuff that I acquired over the years by just experimenting. I'm certainly no chef or anything like that. I just putter. And these days I like puttering with food. So, Schupfnudeln in a bowl with some chicken soup on a cold day. It's just good.